I have liked superheroes for a very long time. Since I was as small as they come, superheroes were about the only thing I cared about. I lived them, and I breathed them. Once I got into middle school, I actually started reading comic books. Before then, all my exposure had come from cartoons and movies and action figures. But since then, having read thousands of issues across Marvel and DC, I would say my familiarity with most characters is pretty good. But I'm only human, and while I may try to read as much as I can in different genres, it's hard for me to not get pulled back into reading mostly the same 4 characters: Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and Daredevil. These 4 occupy probably about 60% of all comics that I have read, which leaves only 40% to split across every other character ever made. So I decided that I would start a new series in order to rectify that issue. Can I take those characters that I'm less familiar with and consume enough content to call myself a superfan? The bar that those 4 superheroes is set extremely high. It is more likely than not that no character I tackle in this series will ever reach the appeal to me of those 4. But I just want to see if I can make myself care about the characters of whom I have the least familiarity with. To start, I thought there was no character better suited than Venom. Here's the reason for it. It's time I come clean. For years and years I have said that I think Venom is kinda stupid. Venom has gotten a reputation as this edgelord anti-hero character, and to me he has always come across as what a younger kid would think is cool, down to his design being simply a black monster with sharp teeth. I think he often falls into the camp of superheroes that includes the Punisher and Deadpool, where people think he's cooler because he's less conventional and maybe he'll say fuck. Now, I'm not saying that any of that is true of Venom. I actually don't know yet. That's what this whole experiment is about. What it is me saying what my first impression of the character was before the deep dive I'm about to do. Also, I'm mostly talking about Eddie Brock in this video. I may touch on the other hosts here and there, but manage your expectations accordingly. First, let's go over what my current baseline familiarity with Venom is. Obviously, I have seen his 2 current live-action movies. I have seen Spider-Man 3, which features Venom. I have played the Spider-Man 2 video game, which heavily features their version of Venom. I've seen the 90s Spider-Man cartoon version, as well as Ultimate Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man's versions. Of course, there are various other cartoons and video games and comic issues in which Venom has popped up in, where I've seen him, but those are the main versions of the character that I have familiarity with. Okay, so, now where do I start? What are the Venom stories that I absolutely need to have read? After doing some quick research, I landed on the following comic books that I will read. Birth of Venom, which includes Amazing Spider-Man 252 through 259, 300, and 315 through 317, among other various issues of other Spider-Man comics. Amazing Spider-Man 330 through 333, which is Venom's return. Amazing Spider-Man 361 through 363, which is Spider-Man and Venom's first team-up against Carnage. Venom Lethal Protector, which is his first solo series that spans 6 issues. Maximum Carnage, the event where Carnage makes his comeback and leads to another Venom Spidey team-up. Venom Separation Anxiety, a fun little 4-issue comic where Eddie and the symbiote are separated. Venom by Donny Cates, including the Absolute Carnage and King in Black events, and the current Venom run by Al Ewing. You might notice, there's quite a bit of Venom stuff missing before Donny Cates. I really am only going with the greatest hits for now, and hopefully it'll encourage me to go back and check out the other stuff after. I can't read it all, damn it. And if reading that gooey fuck's most popular comics can't make me like him, I don't know what will. So, I will see you in a few months, and we'll see if I like the guy yet. 80 hours of Venom content later. Alright. I think I get it now. All this time, I misunderstood the real reason that most people like Venom. He's fucking hilarious. The concept of having a guy whose outward appearance is a big, jet black, hulking beast with sharp teeth and drool be a sassy menace who only has beef with one dude is actually genius. He honestly doesn't even want to be a villain initially. He He just hates Peter Parker that much. In the early Venom issues, Eddie Brock has this childlike naivety when it comes to protecting innocent people, and he says it all the time, that there is nothing more important than protecting the lives of innocent people, except maybe killing Spider-Man. And there's honestly not that much to his time as a villain. Sure, he shows up and fights Spider-Man plenty of times throughout all the years, but he's really more of a thorn in Spider-Man's side than anything else. The thing that scares Peter the most about Venom is that his spider sense doesn't work on him. Before this deep dive, if you had asked me who Spidey's arch nemesis was, I probably would have said Green Goblin, Doc Ock, or Venom, but it's clear to me now that it's definitely not Venom. Maybe Spider-Man is Venom's arch nemesis, but it definitely doesn't go both ways. And even that, Carnage is probably more like Venom's arch nemesis at this point. We all know that Venom transitions to being an anti-hero to eventually more of a straight up good guy, but I think his time as a villain sheds a lot of light on his persona as a hero. If you're unaware, unlike more recent adaptations of the symbiote, originally it didn't make Pete angrier or anything. He just didn't like that it was alive, it freaked him out, and he wanted to get it off. And that adds a different dimension to Eddie and Venom. Instead of it being this evil presence that infects whoever it's with, the symbiote is almost a victim in the original comics. In its eyes, it didn't do anything wrong, and it was cast aside. It was innocent, just like Eddie Brock was innocent. It makes the bond between symbiote and host a lot more believable. They have a reason to be drawn to each other. If you're not tuned in to the current state of Marvel Comics, you might not know that a lot of people have problems with the way Marvel editorial's been handling Peter Parker's character ever since the infamous event Brand New Day. Marvel seems pretty intent on keeping Peter Parker the same no matter what. He can't get married, can't have kids, no matter what happens to him, he always returns to the old status quo. Compare that to Eddie Brock, a character whose progression you can track over the years, and it's clear to see why people are dissatisfied. Even over the smaller amount of stuff I have read, you can still see huge changes in his characterization, from the original villain issues to Maximum Carnage to the King in Black. Circling back to what I was talking about earlier, the bond between Eddie and his symbiote is the central angle to what makes the character work. It's the thing that makes the character unique and unlike other characters. The emphasis that all the comics have that Venom is an us and not an I is always felt. When they're separated, they both feel vulnerable. They really do come across most similar to that of a romantic relationship. It's very funny when you're reading Venom comics and Eddie will just be like, I don't know, I'm gonna have to check with the old battle axe about that, and he's just referring to the sassy pile of goo that lives in his body. In just a second, I'm gonna talk about what adaptation of Venom is the best, but I think this specific aspect is why certain versions of the characters fail for me. If there's no bond, or no dichotomy, there's nothing to the character besides being a mean Spider-Man. And beyond just Venom's personality getting expanded throughout the years, his lore has as well. He is no longer an extension of Spider-Man's lore, he really has a lore of his own. The fact that the King in Black, the name of the symbiote's planet, which is the Clintar, and the concept of the hive mind are all such recent concepts and yet have already made their way into public knowledge, it's indicative of how genius the Donny Cates run is. So much of the lore that I came up with seemed like a no-brainer. So now we've established that I am a certified Venom enjoyer, notice the shirt, and we've established a little bit about what good Venom characterization looks like. So now I want to run through some of the most popular interpretations of the character and see how they stack up. Spider-Man 3 Topher Grace Venom. Obviously not good. Why? Well, for starters, there's no bond between them, and the design is not even slightly cool. It's very obvious Sam Raimi didn't like the character, and thus it's no shocker that it's a bad interpretation of him. There's also no hint of the whole lethal protector thing. This is just a bad guy. You never get the sense that Eddie might deep down care about someone, even Gwen, who he claims to have loved. When he sees her falling off a building, he has limited to no reaction. Spider-Man 2 video game Venom is kind of a complicated one. I touched on it in my review of the game, if you want to check that out, the link's down below. But again, this version of Venom feels too much like the symbiotes take over the host rather than them actually having a bond. Peter doesn't feel influenced by the symbiote as much as he feels controlled by it. The same goes for Harry, who is pretty much just along for the ride and is not an active part of Venom's characterization. Harry has no reason to hate Spider-Man, so it just feels like the villain is just the symbiote and not the host. It's sort of the opposite problem of the Topher Grace version. That one was too much host, not enough symbiote, This one is too much symbiote, not enough host. It also jumps to the whole symbiote world / King in Black stuff way too quickly. That stuff should be saved for the Venom game that we all know they're making. The stakes get too big too quickly and we lose any connection between Peter and Venom. Ideally, I think this one would keep the stakes smaller and have the back half of the game just involve Peter and Miles tracking Venom down and fighting him as one guy. And that could end with him running away to go have his solo adventures. Then in a spin-off game, we could bring in all this symbiote world stuff or Carnage or whatever. This one also loses points for just not doing Eddie Brock. And let me be clear, I don't think Harry being the host is a bad idea, but you've got to have a reason for doing it. As it stands, you could have just written Brock into the story instead of Harry, and it probably just would have been better. And again, following this up with a Venom solo game would have been a lot cooler if Venom was just a guy who hated Spider-Man and not a god capable of turning New York into symbiote Vegas. As it stands in the game, Venom is now kind of irredeemable for his actions. I just think he got too powerful, too quick. It works in the comics after decades of character progression, but here it's not earned. But this is my favorite design of Venom. I need all 19 inches. Next up, Venom movies. There actually is quite a bit to say about these two movies, but to address the elephant in the room, the biggest problem is the lack of any Spider-Man. Venom's origin is so intrinsically tied to Spider-Man that doing an entire series without him just never feels quite right. And the movies seem to know that. You can look at the glaring empty space on Venom's body where the spider logo is supposed to be. But aside from that, looking at Venom and Eddie themselves, I think this is a fun take. Eddie being this absolute fucking disaster man who just cannot get his shit together is very on brand, and then you just get to watch his life spiral further out of control when he's introduced to his sassy goopy bestie. We all know, I'm all about that bond, and these two have the sauce. They are funny, they have breakups, they get back together, there is so much sexual tension.
When you love someone, you accept the whole person, with all of their defects.
Before my deep dive, I thought this was a creative choice from the Sony filmmakers when I watched these movies, but now it really was all there on the page for them to pull from. And Venom gets to be funny here, which is another thing that is surprisingly really in character.
Who found the clue? Who?
Wow.
Yeah. Fuck this guy!
Climb a really tall tree, but super fast.
Yes, we just did.
But this adaptation does have another pretty glaring problem. The Lethal Protector. The end of the first movie sets up that Venom and Eddie have their agreement and they're ready to be lethal protectors. Cool, whatever. Then the second movie rolls around and they're not doing it. They're having the same argument as before and they spend most of the movie giving each other the silent treatment. Also, this is unrelated, but Carnage is bad. Woody Harrelson is a really weird choice and giving him a girlfriend is weird. I know the girlfriend is there on the page, but I still don't think it worked there. The whole interesting part of the relationship between Venom and Carnage is that while Eddie and Venom struggle to work together, Cletus and the Carnage symbiote are in perfect harmony. This movie mentions that, but doesn't do anything with it. And it's a missed opportunity because Carnage dies at the end, and that's all. Oops, sorry, I'm just getting word. Yeah, another problem with these two movies is that they are bad. Figure that might be worth mentioning. And Venom has no villainous past, so he has nothing to be remorseful about. He's just kind of a generic hero type. Eddie Brock going from the evil Spider-Man to the heroic King in Black, earning the respect of the Avengers, is what makes him cool. That's redemption, baby. Zuko who? In this blank production house, the only redemption arc we recognize is that of Edward Eddie Charles Allen Brock. Last up, Spectacular Spider-Man Venom. Hold on to your butts, kids. This is the good one. I actually do think this is the only well-done version of both Venom and the Black Suit Saga. Obviously, this was a Spider-Man show and not a Venom show, so here he is a villain through and through. But if it didn't get cancelled, I bet we would have worked up to a team-up involving Carnage. And the point stands that this Eddie does feel like both a victim and a human, and they have a bond. Being separated from Venom is traumatic for Eddie. It disappoints me that the show didn't continue, for more reasons than I have minutes left in the world, but Venom is a major part of it. I don't like the tummy mouth though. It's weird, I don't like the design. Alright. I guess I like Venom now. Honestly, I spent so long not liking the guy that this is very surprising to me. But I really enjoyed my deep dive into the little slime ball, and I really haven't even scratched the surface. There's so much more to the character. I haven't read any of Flash Thompson's time as the character. Did you know he was on the Guardians of the Galaxy? I didn't. So definitely gonna check that out. And Mac Gargan and his time with the Thunderbolts and the Dark Avengers, and then there's a whole host of other symbiotes and their storylines. I will probably never read everything Venom related, but it's cool that I have a new section of the Marvel Universe that I can say I'm knowledgeable about. So, do you like Venom? If you're not familiar, maybe check out some of the comics I mentioned earlier and see if you could end up liking him like I now do. And let me know below what your favorite version of the character is. This is a series I'd like to do again with some other characters I'm not all that familiar with. So tune in next time for an equally in-depth but hopefully much less gooey episode of this series. Bye now.